Hello, everybody. I am thrilled to be here in this beautiful setting. For those of you who don't know, Cognitiv is celebrating our 10th anniversary. And to mark the occasion, we are hosting a series of panels on the boat with agencies and brands. And I am thrilled to be here with Liane Nadeau, the Chief Investment Officer at Digitas. And I think you and I have pretty different backgrounds.
That's safe to say, yeah.
Yeah. I I'm a neuroscientist and sort of
I am
computer
not.
machine learning person, whereas I think you have deep expertise on the buy side, guiding investment for Digitas and sort of understanding clients' needs and figuring out how to invest in order to meet those needs. And so I'm really looking forward to picking your brain about your perspective on AI, which is probably a little bit different than mine, and hopefully share some wisdom with all of you. Uh, so I wanted to get started with where AI is today. And so when it comes to trying new things, we find some of our clients actually, I'm going to start with a different question.
Yeah.
Take it back. One sec.
Give me a
This
second.
got mixed up. Ah, I apologize.
I'm gonna start with a story
I'm gonna
then.
wing it.
I'm
I'm
gonna
gonna
start
wing
with a
it.
story. So maybe 7 years ago, I think it was definitely more it was pre-pandemic and, definitely pre-2019. So, I can say with certainty that it's over 6 years ago that Cognitiv, when you guys were partnered with IBM, I believe it was, came into the Digitas office in Boston where I work, and you were talking about this thing called neural networks, and I was like, "These guys are kinda crazy." And we were talking about AI before it became ChatGPT-ified and everyone started talking about it and knowing about it. And I think so much of that presentation, I don't consider myself to have a very good memory, but I can remember so much of that presentation because what Cognitive was doing that many years ago was so on the cutting edge. And as we thought about, as I've continued to learn about AI and neural networks and LLMs and how we use those things in marketing, I've gone back to that and what I learned in that presentation so long ago, many, many times. So I
That
thank
is
you for
amazing, kinda
thank you for that.
introduced you to deep learning.
Yes.
That's
Yep.
cool. Well, I'm curious today, you're seeing the marketplace. Are there applications of AI that you're thinking about that are maybe underappreciated by your clients and brands?
Yeah, I think everyone's talking about what can we do with AI, and where I struggle there is AI is not a strategy. And we kind of keep having to repeat that to ourselves and to our clients that AI in and of itself is not a strategy. AI is an enabler of a strategy. And so what I fear the most is right now that it's such a buzzword, and it has been for a couple of years now, but it's such a buzzword that I don't want it to replace a strategy of who are we trying to reach? What are we trying to accomplish from a business perspective? And what are the right contexts and environments to do that? Because everyone is chasing the AI testing they're hoping to do. I do think that people don't realize that they are already using it. I mean, AI is embedded into so many of the platforms we have been using for many, many years. I think one of the things that I'm seeing clients and my teams become more astute to and want to know more about is transparency in AI and knowing where we're using it, how it's being used, how those models are trained, on what data, how much of our data is being used to train those models. I think those are the things that we're starting to have conversations around. Everyone's familiar with Google's PMax and, it performs. And so to some extent, clients are happy with that. But on the other end, the loss of control is a challenging question. So I think there are areas we're using it that aren't getting talked about enough. And I think we're starting to work with clients to unpack those, but then to figure out where are the right areas to apply the technology versus just saying, let's do an AI test.
That makes sense. When I think about AI, I do think it's been used in ad tech for a long time. In many ways, machine learning cut its teeth in ad tech. But there is a fundamental change, which is that traditionally machine learning has focused on statistics like, okay, what's the CPM? What's the CTR? How can I tweak that? But today's AI understands things more semantically. It can reason about what this page is about and how might that influence a person. So I'm curious, are you seeing with PMax, I think of as more statistical. Are you seeing those more semantic applications? Are those being asked for from the bottom up from your clients?
I don't think enough people know the difference, if I'm being honest. I think you obviously come from such an educated and deep background in this space. I think for the majority of people probably along Loquassette, it's a little more elementary than that. I think what you're talking about though is so intriguing to me in the sense of we've been using ML, AI, however you want to describe it, to optimize and to ruthlessly narrow our focus on subsets of audiences, of sites, of in with the effort to get either an outcome optimized to or a CPM down, but what that's actually done is the opposite of what we have the ability to do now, which is actually go out and find new growth. And you and I talked about this the other night quite a bit, where we've seen this space of machine learning being used to narrow, and we've actually seen for a lot of clients they've optimized themselves out of growth because what the subsets or the historical technology can do is say, okay, look within this group and find the most narrow, the most, efficient, and the challenge with that is you're ignoring everyone else, and so what I think we're finally starting to see through people like Cognitiv or partners like Cognitiv is the ability to use and unleash the technology to actually chase growth.
Yeah, I think that actually relates to sort of the statistical versus semantic. So if you're just looking statistically, you're just going to find the people that have the highest click-through rate or whatever it is. But if you understand, you might say, oh, well, if those people click and they read content similar to those, then maybe there's like uh, a new segment that you could or audience that you could go discover and expand what you're discovering.
And I'd say too, on the lens of transparency, which probably isn't the right word for what I mean, it's also about like a feedback loop. Like I want to know then. So if we are able to go and say, so people who read this, also do this over here, they might not have been in your audience segment you predefined, but we should go after them. I think the feedback loop is something that we want to solve too of how do we then use that insight to help inform creative, to help inform our strategy, product development, because there's so much that we can learn as a feedback loop from the AI and from what it's telling us. And I think that's one of the areas I'm most excited.
Yeah, neural networks is commonly referred to as a black box technology. And I think a lot of our effort has recently over the last year has been trying to crack that open and offer new insights. Um, I think a big opportunity with AI today is personalization. And there's sort of two sides to that coin. One side is, hey, you need to be able to generate all these creatives and then this other side is, well, let's say you had hundreds of creatives. How do you figure out the right person to show those to? So I'm curious, are you seeing I've heard around can a lot the term hyper personalization. Are you seeing success in that area? And if so, where and how are you pursuing personalization?
I think it's still early, and it's funny because I remember many, many years ago now, I'm going back like almost a decade, helping create a presentation for one of our brands in Cannes before I was, lucky enough to get to be here. And it was about personalization, and it was this idea of one to one. And I think we all remember when, a decade ago we were starting to talk about one to one, but we didn't have the technology nor the capabilities to actually deliver on that. And I think we're in a place where we can. I think what we've come to maybe take a step back on is do we need to? Do we need to be one to one? Do we need to actually get to that level of granularity? Are we sophisticated enough from a creative approval process to get to a true one to one place? So I think we are starting to test back in. I would say it's not quite at the extent of creative go, run, build, generate on your own and live and let God. I think very few clients are gonna be and have the appetite to be able to do that. So I'd say we're testing it on the creative side more slowly than we are on the media and the bidding side, frankly, because of the need for some regulation and some approvals and things like that. So I think we're just at the precipice of what we could do from a creative AI, generative AI for creative perspective, and I think it's going to move slower than the technology would allow because of the things that go into approvals, brand standards, and I think there's fear around that.
Yeah, and I think moving slow makes sense because if you go too hard, that hyper personalization could erode trust. It could make people uncomfortable if that message is a little too personalized. Maybe we could transition to sort of the more practical, sort of like putting AI into practice. As AI gets smarter, one of my hopes is we can start optimizing toward real business outcomes more than sort of proxies like CTR and VCR. And I'm curious, are you seeing a shift in the metrics your clients or you are interested in? Or if not, how do you balance the sort of shorter term, more proxies like CTR with the back end metrics that might be more core to the business?
Yeah, I'd say I'd hope that most of our clients, if not all of them, have been looking at things besides CPM, CTR, view through rate, for a couple of years now. But I think for a really long time, there have been kind of two metrics we've looked at. There's the real business KPI that for many of our clients and categories cannot be measured in real time. And then there's these optimization metrics. And the optimization metrics are the things we talked about: click through rate, last click attribution, conversion rate, sometimes ROAS. And what I think I'm hoping for, and what I think the technology is now enabling, is those two things to get smushed back together. Because for so long, especially in the branding side of our business, we haven't had a near term optimization metric that is indicated or even necessarily correlated to the long-term business outcome. I think for a while we were looking at attention. Could attention be that? And for some brands it was, for some brands it wasn't. But for many of our clients, this isn't a conversation about a new KPI. It's about allowing the long-term business KPI to be measured and optimized to in real time. And that's where I'm excited about the convergence of kind of short and long-term KPI metrics coming together.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. In terms of adopting AI, we see some of our clients are sort of more risk takers and some are a little more cautious. And I'm curious, do you see that sort of variation? And if so, how do you guide your clients through that? Deciding what to adopt and when.
Yeah, it's such a good question. And in my role, I oversee clients across a number of different categories, all the way from financial services to CPG to QSR to entertainment, down to retail. And I think you're absolutely right. The appetite for risk is very, very different across those. You can imagine a financial services. We had a financial services client who can't even use retargeting because they just deemed the pixel not safe on site. And so you're talking really, really conservative all the way to some of our a beauty brand who is really willing to go out there and test. I think in terms of technology testing and the underside, I'm seeing a lot more appetite for that. I think where there's more risk tolerance is changed because it used to be, I don't know if we can test that targeting. I don't know if we can. I see the risk more so right now. Brands having challenges relinquishing control of to creators and relinquishing control of creative, which is why I think we're going to see a much faster adoption of AI on the targeting optimization side than the creative side. And I think part of that is just because of the climate we live in and the way that brands can get canceled so quickly, if they have a misstep that is more public in terms of creative or what the brand stands for, or who's talking about them. So there's absolutely a complete, bell curve of risk tolerance. But the way we're having those conversations varies based on what it is they're worried about.
Hmm. I mean, Gen AI has been around for a few years now. Is there one success case that you're like that you feel like clients should or consistently are willing to adopt and ends up being a win for you?
There isn't one because it really varies client to client. Like for me, what I've seen is when you say the way in for generative AI and use of neural networks in media buying and targeting is there's kind of the application to their business that is something where we ingest data that is not necessarily um, something they have within their media ecosystem, but it lives outside. So, for example, you might ingest store data of sales and based on markets in real time. And then the application of that to media, that is the story I've been able to sell in a lot easier than just, hey, there's this thing, it's going to make your media work better. Let's go do it. So I think it really is custom to each individual client and category what they care about that we can bring in from the outside, and then therefore what they're willing to test.
Interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, as a chief investment officer, I have to imagine you're uh, you're having to make strategic decisions around which areas of AI to focus on because there's so many possible applications. It's such a broadly applicable technology. So I'm curious, where are you most focused in terms of this is where I need to figure out how to use this technology?
There's two things. There's the for clients' business and there's for our business. So I think I'm kind of focused really maniacally on how we use AI in the right ways to help make our business better, and more efficient and move faster and more nimbly. So that's one side of the coin, that we know we need to do and do very quickly in order to compete in the agency landscape. And then there's for our clients' business. And from that perspective, I would say equally bullish on how we use AI and generative AI in building strategies as I am in activation. I think activation is the easier thing to do and something that all of our clients need to start testing into pretty immediately if they aren't already. Many of ours are. But on the planning side, I think there's real application of how we decide between partners, how we decide to allocate our investment that we've been doing pretty, I would say, basic work on in the past. And now there's the ability to accelerate that.
How might AI help you accelerate that planning process? Are there some specifics?
Yeah, I would say one of the things that we're constantly trying to do is understand audiences, right? At every single stage of the game, but be it creative or media. And I actually am lucky enough to work at a full service agency, so we do both creative and media. And we always start with the audience, but the audience is they're dynamic, they're challenging, they're hard to understand. And so we're using generative AI to actually feed data and using those audiences, we call them synthetic audiences, to ask questions. Like, where are you spending your time? How are you thinking about these brands? What are the things that are your barriers to purchase? And that's one of the ways that, we're just using it in upfront planning. We're also infusing AI into all of our tools. So we've obviously, as many media agencies do, we have lots of tools within Publicis, one of them being called the Growth OS, that allows us to understand historical media mix curves and then use that to inform the places we go, the channels, the partners. We're using that, and that is now enabled and accelerated by generative AI in a way that allows us to see opportunities that if we just went in with the binary constraints that we've historically used, we wouldn't see. So those are kind of some of the ways we're using it on the strategy acceleration, but we've barely cracked the surface.
Yeah, the synthetic audience idea is interesting. We've done some things like that. We're trying to understand personas with AI. There's a bit of a risk there around bias, because you generate this synthetic audience. Are there sort of ways that you're trying to mitigate that?
Yes, definitely, and it's something we talk about a lot is the bias that's introduced through artificial intelligence writ large. I think what we try to do from that perspective is not rely on one source, and I think that's, it doesn't sound very sophisticated, but, what we're trying to do is say, "This is one input," because we're not in a place yet where it's perfect, where it's trusted, where we know there's no bias introduced. So we use it as one input, but we still validate in some of the more traditional ways.
Totally. And maybe that forces you to have a human in the loop to sort of assess it. All right, maybe we can close by going to a little more future looking. Hopefully these
The
questions,
next decade.
yes, you can use your crystal ball. It's a hazardous exercise. But going back to your role as chief investment officer, you must hear a lot of pitches. And so I'm curious, is there like a fantasy AI pitch? Like, this is the story you want to hear from a partner that would really solve a need or a problem that you have?
Yeah, I think what would be interesting to see is I think there's a lot of application of AI to solve current problems, to solve the how do we identify new growth audiences? How do we reach these consumers that we know we need to reach? How do we get our CPMs down? I think what I'm most excited about is the use of telling me what I don't know. What is my problem that I actually am not aware of? And I think that to me, as we think about data insights, as we think about application of those to the way we go to market and plan, I think excites me a lot because, I give the example that right now we might say, hey, our audience is this subset of first party data and we use that as an input and we go and then can use AI to optimize and to exclude and to narrow. I think that's my fear is that we use it in that way versus tell me what I don't know. Who are the audiences I'm not thinking about? What is the strategy or the plan I'm not aware of? What communities are interested in my brand that I might not be aware of yet? So I don't know that it's one single thing that would be the perfect pitch, but to me it's more on the upfront application of and use of insight generation and telling us what we don't know that can inform both the media and the creative.
Yeah, I think that relates to 2 topics we've been talking about. So, first of all, I think it relates to the difference between sort of classic ML and ML today, which is classic ML is that statistical optimized, whereas today's AI can sort of reason and explore. So it's a reinforcement learning. What distinguishes it from older types of machine learning is it can do trial and error to discover new things. So it doesn't just play chess as well as a human, but can learn to play better than a human, which is
Yeah,
sort of
and
what
the
you want.
feedback loop, I guess, is it going back to kinda what I had said before, I think I wanna know then, what is it learning? And that's where I think, some of the applications of technology would be so interesting. You'd almost have media buys that were specifically going out to find insights, and that to me is such a cool way to think about use of the technology.
Cool. Let's see. I got two more questions, and we'll wrap up. One is more future. Yesterday, I gave a talk at Future Gazers, and we were talking about the fact that very small but growing percent of web traffic is now being conducted by agents on behalf of humans. Mark, my CTO over there, uses OpenAI all the time and asks questions, and it goes out and browses the web on his behalf in order to answer them. And so I'm curious, is that something you're thinking about and like how you're going to respond as this growing percentage of web traffic is not being conducted by people?
100%. Especially, I think we're focused on it the most within our search practice, and it's going to quickly expand beyond that because what we're saying now is we have both SEM and SEO teams, and our SEO teams they kind of always they never got their time in the sun really. They were in the back doing the optimization, doing the site. And now there's just such a conversation that our clients are coming to us about is how do we ready ourselves to be the answer for agents because we're not creating content for humans anymore. Now, we're not there yet. To your point, it's still growing and small, but we need to be thinking about how are we creating content that will be surfaced in these generative AI search engines because we not only right now I think we're even in kind of phase 1 of this, right? I go in and I say, "Hey, ChatGPT, can you give me an itinerary for Cannes?" I think we're gonna get to a place where I say, "Hey, book my can trip," and it's gonna go and do, and it's gonna be agent to agent conversations that we're not ready for yet, and our brands aren't ready for it yet. I think even as humans, we're probably not ready to relinquish control yet, but that's coming, and it's coming faster than we think. So we're talking to our clients today about how they ready their sites, ready their SEO content, ready all of that to make sure that they show up in the right ways, both from an ad perspective, because there's growing ad opportunities there, but also just in an organic perspective. And then we're thinking about now how are we starting to build agent to agent conversations because that's where we're headed pretty quickly.
Yeah, I think there's so many different business models there. We could probably talk for a long time, but I need to wrap up. Let me ask one question we're asking at the end of every panel. So, we're celebrating our decade of deep learning. And so sticking with the theme of 10, what do you see as being the biggest underrated opportunity or advancement for marketers in the next 10 months?
The biggest underrated
Yeah, it's a mouthful.
opportunity in the next 10 months. I thought you were going to say the next 10 years and I was going to have to really dig. No, in the next 10 months I think the biggest underrated opportunity is the one that I've described as the most challenging. It is use of generative AI for creative. I think we're in a place where creative needs to evolve and I think we've done a better job of it on the media side than we have on the creative side. And so that's probably the most underrated now and tying those two things closer together is really important. Tying what we're doing from a media buy perspective to what we're then showing up looking like.
Thank you so much for coming
Thank
on
you.
today, sharing your thoughts and your wisdom. And thank all of you for being here and listening and being on our panel.